Going to go ahead and get started. So if everyone could join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, we will start with introductions. If we could start with Mr. Allen.
Scott Allen.
Bill Scaletta.
Greg Eating.
Rachel Wade.
Kevin Bushu.
Jason Beckrow.
Lori Van Koenig.
Okay. Board members, looking at the agenda, I would take a motion to approve tonight's agenda.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? All right, moving on. Approval of the consent action items. So tonight, that includes the minutes of our May meeting, the financial statements and bills from May, and renewal of our MHSAA membership.
So moved.
Support.
This is roll call. Mrs. Van Koenig?
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow?
Aye.
Mr. Bushu?
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta?
Aye.
Mr. Ott?
Aye.
Mr. Allen?
Aye.
And I vote aye. Okay, up next is Superintendent Informational Report.
Thank you. Awesome to see a few of you at the LEF board, golf outing today, which was a lot of fun. Superintendent report is just reading through this. Summer break is here. Finally happy to report that we had a successful end to the school year. Graduation took place on Friday, June 2nd, and it was a beautiful night. Thought it was going to be hot, but it actually turned out perfect. We had 192 students graduate this year, 151 of them planning to go on to school, either a college or trade school, 33 planning to go directly into the workforce, and 8 planning to go on to the armed forces. Kind of a cool breakdown. I'd like to recognize the outstanding accomplishments by our recent graduates of the Math Science Center. This year's group distinguished themselves in many ways and provided evidence of how this program, one of many, helps students achieve their potential. Here are some highlights of the Math Science Center. 100% of the graduates were accepted to four-year colleges or universities. Declared majors, first time declared majors, I'll say. Computer science, engineering, psychology, neuroscience, medicine, philosophy, and criminal justice. The average SAT score was a 1350 average. Man. Scholarship awards totaled $100,000 in scholarship awards for our Math Science Center student graduates. So kind of cool. Congratulations to these students and their teachers for their amazing accomplishments. What they have achieved is a point of pride for Lakeshore Public Schools. The class of 1973 was honored at graduation. This year, as it was their 50th reunion, I was able to meet with this group for about an hour prior to graduation. They're such a proud group of people, mostly proud to be graduates of Lakeshore. They asked me one question: what class went 13-0 in football and beat St. Joe? Of course, it was their group. And I told them that in the yearbook for 1973, it said 9-0 and beat St. Joe under the football part. Always fun to see the 4 pages of football and the 1 page of everything else that is in those yearbooks. Also, prior to graduation, the LEF hosted Bob Adkins, this year's recipient of the Distinguished Alumni Award. Bob received his plaque during graduation and made some remarks. He is a 1958 graduate of the very first class for Lakeshore Schools. Prior to that, it was Stevensville Schools. And because his name begins with A, he was actually the very first graduate from Lakeshore Schools. I thought that was kind of cool. Business-wise, our enrollment numbers look good for going into this coming summer for the next year. The state's per pupil foundation allowance is also looking good, which sets us up for a nice financial spot, just as you kind of saw from Tracy coming up. One note with that, it looks like we're going to have 3 sections of Young Fives next year, one for every building, which is kind of a cool thing too. And as for bond projects, we'll be starting with the playground updates at Roosevelt and Hollywood and hope to have those completed by, Nick just stepped out, October? I'm thinking October is what we were talking about the other day. He was having a tough time getting nailed down by that date, so, but we're hoping for that. We will be publishing a lot of information to the families of the district as the bond projects begin to take shape. Just so you know, you maybe drove in and saw the stuff on the rooftop here for roof replacement. Those are sinking fund uses of sinking fund money for these. So these are all scheduled roof updates. So, and finally, I'd like to say thank you to thank you to the students, families, and staff for just a really great school year. And I hope that everyone has a safe and restful summer.
Excellent, thank you. Moving into Board of Education reports, we start with the Policy Committee. Mr. Allen, would you read that, please?
The Policy Committee met on Thursday, June 1st at 4:30 p.m. Present in the meeting were Lori Von Koenig, Greg Eating, and myself. Committee finished reviewing policies from the Neola Spring Update. The committee also provided input on the process and procedures related to library books in the district. One change is the addition of spine labels to clearly communicate young adult and adult interest levels. And another change is to provide a more formalized process for parents, guardians to restrict student access to high school library materials via an annual electronic form.
Thank you. Moving on to Facilities and Finance, Mr. Bushu.
Facilities and Finance Committee met on June 6th at 7:15 a.m. Present at the meeting were Rachel Wade, Griffin Ott, Tracy Aldhouse, Greg Eating, and myself. Items discussed were Tracy presented the monthly financials, including budget to actual, investment schedule, and sinking fund schedule. No items of concern were noted. Budget modification number 4, which we saw a little bit earlier in the preliminary budget for 23-24, were discussed in detail, and we've seen those earlier. And Greg and Tracy briefly discussed our upcoming bond projects, and in the future, the committee will be getting brief updates on costs and projects.
Excellent.
Progress, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Next is some action related to the Berrien Risa CTE Consortium. Mr. Eating, do you want to read this or do you want me to read this?
I can read it.
Okay. I mean, I'm happy to. I just didn't know.
No, it's fine. So Berrien County School Districts have a continuous agreement since 1993 to collaborate around the county-wide model for programming for career and technical education. The local school districts of Berrien County are seeking to extend the CTE Consortium partnership under Public Act 451, Section 690 of the School Code of 1976, which will be adopted for the 2023-24 school year and remain in effect through the 2043 school year.
Board members, there was a lot of information that was provided with our agenda in our board packet. So I would entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Excellent. Moving on. Ratifying the sale of the 2023 bonds resolution. So enclosed is a copy of the resolution received from Troon Law Firm to ratify and affirm the acceptance of the offer for the sale of the bonds related to the May election for the par value purchase price of $19,899,037.79.
79 cents?
79 cents.
Not 71.
Not 71.
Okay.
79.
So moved.
Support.
And this is a roll call, so Mr. Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Ott,
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta,
Aye.
Mr. Bushu,
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow,
Aye.
Mrs. Von Koenig,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Okay. Now moving into changing the regular meeting date for our July meeting, again, due to the inability to have a quorum that last week in June so that we can do the organizational meeting. We'd like to move the July meeting to a little bit later in the month and combine that with the organizational meeting so that we've got all of our ducks in a row. So the proposal is July 24th. Is that to be an AM or a PM meeting? Because in
I'm
July,
open
we
for
usually
whatever.
meet, July,
A
we
lot of
usually
times
meet
we
in the
meet
morning,
in the
right?
morning in July.
July and August usually are.
It's a
early, but I
Monday
don't know if
morning.
Scott can
Scott's,
be a 7 or 7:15, I think, usually.
I can look and see if I can make it work or not.
all right.
And does anybody else have a challenge with July 24th in the AM?
Okay.
All
Let's do
right, then I would accept a motion to make that change to our regular meeting.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay.
Rachel, are we tentatively saying 7:15?
Yeah, that worked, yeah. Okay,
7:15 works for me. Let's do it.
You're bringing donuts,
There
right?
will be coffee?
Is Red Coach open on Mondays? Is Red Coach open Mondays?
I don't think it is open on Mondays now,
All right, I have to get some other kind of donuts.
Maybe
so-
bagels with the board.
Bagels with the
There you go.
board.
but
Bagels for the board.
Full Circle is open on Mondays, though.
Ah, yes. There are some food.
Very good.
Okay, moving on. Based on the highly effective rating that we gave to Superintendent Eating earlier in the year, we need to approve the full contractual merit pay of 10% as allowed per his contract. So I would accept a motion to support.
So moved and well-deserved.
Support.
And this is a roll call vote. So Mr. Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Ott,
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta,
Aye.
Mr. Bushu,
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow,
Aye.
Mrs. Von Koenig,
Aye.
and I vote aye.
Thank you.
Moving right along, a personnel update. Mr. Eating.
Yes, I can't wait till not have to do all these reports like this anymore, Susan. As announced last week and effective on July 1st, middle school principal Susan Toothman has accepted the position of Director of Human Resources and Communication, and Hollywood principal Natalie Maserata has accepted the Director of Curriculum and Instruction position. Would either of you like to stand up and say anything at all? Well planned, all of 2 seconds
On the spot.
before.
I've been honored to serve in my principal role for the last 8 years here at Lakeshore. I look forward to serving in this next role. Knowing the ins and outs of elementary, I think will be a huge focus for early literacy and then continue our solution tree work as well. So I am thankful and I welcome the opportunity for this next chapter.
And like Natalie, I'm excited as well. I really want to focus on culture and climate, making sure our communication within our district as well as outside of our district is solid. With that being said, I feel the experiences I bring from a variety of different districts and the different roles will prove to be really useful for us, and hopefully we will continue on the track that we are, be the most successful school district in the state.
Very good.
Nice. Also, previously announced, we are excited to welcome Jerry Holtgren as the new high school principal. Jerry comes from Niles Community Schools, where he served as director and principal of Niles New Tech Entrepreneurial Academy. Another addition to the high school staff is Ian Gordon, who has accepted the social studies teaching position. He received his bachelor's degree from Western and his master's degree from Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University.
Easy.
Yeah. I talked to him on the phone the other day. It's pretty cool story. So, Cheryl Thompson and Abby Gibbons will both be kindergarten teachers at Hollywood. Cheryl has just finished filling in as a year-long substitute teacher in this role at Hollywood, and she received her bachelor's degree from Western. Abby received her bachelor's degree from Hope College and her master's degree from Liberty. She has taught for the past 2 years in Iowa. And finally, actually 2 more. Lauren Kenny has accepted the position of kindergarten teacher at Stewart. She also received her degree from Western. She is relocating back to Southwest Michigan after teaching in Florida. Also joining the Stewart staff is Meredith Margin, who will be teaching 4th grade. She served her bachelor's degree from Butler and has been teaching in Indiana.
Excellent. Board members, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving right along. 2022, 2023 preliminary final budget modification. Mr. Eating.
Chief Financial Officer Tracy Althouse reviewed the preliminary budget modification for the 22-23 school year during tonight's budget hearing. We recommend that the preliminary final budget modification and the appropriation resolution be adopted as presented.
Excellent. And again, Tracy, thank you for the presentation earlier. Always good information, and it's very clear that you and your team put a lot of work into making sure that all the numbers are where they need to be. Board members, I would take a motion.
So moved.
Support?
This is a roll call vote. So Mr. Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Ott,
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta,
Aye.
Mr. Bushu,
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow,
Aye.
Mrs. Von Koenig,
Aye.
and I vote aye. And along the same line of thinking, the 2023-2024 budget appropriation.
Yeah, the proposed budget for the 23-24 fiscal year was reviewed earlier tonight during the budget hearing. We now recommend its adoption as presented.
So moved.
Support.
And another roll call vote. Mr. Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Ott,
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta,
Aye.
Mr. Bushu,
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow,
Aye.
Mrs. Von Koenig,
Aye.
and I vote aye. We are packing a lot of roll call votes into this meeting tonight because we've got another one coming up. We need to certify the 2023 tax levy.
Included is Form L-4029 from Chief Financial Officer Tracy Althouse, which describes the tax levy, which was discussed in the budget hearing earlier tonight. The tax levy includes 1.98 mils for the 2013 bond, 18 mils for the operating fund, non-homestead, 1.4734 for the building site sinking fund, and 0.82 for the 2023 bond. We recommend that the tax levy be approved as presented.
All right. Board members, I would accept a motion.
So moved.
Support.
And another roll call vote. And I'd like to say this is the last one of the night, but it is not. So I'm going to go in backwards order. Mrs. Von Koenig,
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow,
Aye.
Mr. Bushu,
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta,
Aye.
Mr. Ott,
Aye.
Mr. Allen,
Aye.
and I vote aye. Now we have a whole passel of bid approval recommendations.
Yeah, I got a feeling we're going to be doing a bunch of these over the next couple of years.
Yeah,
here.
for a while.
So, the first is the land survey. 4 land survey work bids for the upcoming bond projects were received from Abbenmarsh, Driesinga, Fleiss, and Vandenbrink, and Whiteman. King Scott is recommending Abbenmarsh, who submitted the lowest qualified proposal at $36,200.
Information was included in our packets related to all of this, so board members, are there any questions?
Actually, I want to make a comment, if that's okay.
Go
Sorry.
right ahead.
Not that I'm a board member, but just so everybody realizes that as we start going through these bids on the board policy, and previously there was language in the board policy that put a 10% range for local contracts. That is actually no longer in our board policy. However, it isn't a bad practice to take a look at obviously local and trying to really stay as local as you possibly can. So just as everybody realizes that, for example, in this one, Abbenmarsh it's not like they're far away. I think they ran out of Benton Harbor, St. Joe area. Whiteman is very, like, right in our neck of the woods right here. And this bid is about $15,000-ish, a little bit less than that, less than the Whiteman bid. So I just wanted everyone to realize that that's an important aspect and something that we are very much taking seriously as we look at all the bids. So, all right.
So it's something we can tee up for the next policy meeting and,
Yeah.
and revisit that language
can.
because I think that's important to have that ability within the policy, especially as we move into all the bond work.
I believe it was one of the policies under review currently.
Yeah, we can
and-
actually take a look at that real quick in July and see if there's, just making
We
sure
should
that we're on
probably
it.
try
But
to
I think,
push that one, make sure we get that handled quickly because
Yep.
we're going to have a lot of stuff coming with the bonds. So
Yep.
yep, that makes sense.
I would be interested in why it was in the policy and then is no longer in the policy. If
Yeah,
there
that's
was
a good
if
question.
there was
I
a
don't know.
rationale so that we
Right.
don't
Did it just
put
expire?
it back in for a,
I don't know.
without understanding that. Okay.
Yeah.
Love the idea. It promotes
Yeah, I don't remember removing it.
local use, but then
And
puts
really what it
guardrails
does
on
is it
as
says,
well
here's your
to keep
lowest
it-
bid. At, like, for example, in this case, it'd be $36,000. You add 10% to that bid. And then if your local bidders come within that range, you would take that local bid. That's what it is.
You'd have the right to consider taking. the
Yes.
Right.
You always have the right to consider any of the bids. Yep.
I think that we had this discussion in policy slightly about it because it was interesting to go through it and see kind of what, there wasn't a lot of changes to what was there, but that it does kind of lead you to the lowest bid, but it gives some leeway, like the 10%, which we used to have, or just to evaluate based on what the bid itself is actually giving you. But it still has some legal requirements looking at the lowest bid and things like that.
Yeah, it was, prior to that, historically, when I started, it was lowest bid, period, end of story, with no flexibility. So that's why we had made that adjustment, because sometimes it's local bid, sometimes it's people that have done 90% of the work on that particular area of the school for the last 20 years, and we have a comfort and a knowledge of it. So,
Right.
so
And
I
also,
would like to
there's-
see that revisited.
You really want to
and
make sure
we
you
can get
you do
that.
your homework too,
Yep.
and not just take any bid
Right.
based off from, recommendations and so forth, like almost like you're picking a staff member for that matter with doing interviews and so forth too at times. So,
Yeah.
all right, I just wanted to make that a point just
Yeah,
because
no, thank you.
I thought it was worthwhile. So, thank you.
All right, any other questions on the land survey bid? Then I would take a motion.
So moved.
Support.
All right, Mr. Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Ott.
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta,
Aye.
Mr. Bushu,
All right,
Dr. Beckrow,
Aye.
Mrs. Von Koenig,
Aye.
and I vote aye.
Elementary audio and visual upgrade bids. 2 bids were received for the elementary audio and visual upgrade package, which is part of the 2023 bond. Tech Director Chris Quartermain recommends accepting the bid from Tech Experience in the amount of $575,134.
Any questions?
So moved.
Support.
All right, Mr. Allen,
Aye.
Mr. Ott,
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta,
Aye.
Mr. Bushu,
all right.
Dr. Beckrow,
Aye.
Mrs. Von Koenig,
Aye.
and I vote aye.
And I think this is where the 10-passenger transit van came up from today earlier. So 1 bid was received for a used 2019 Ford Transit 10-passenger van for people transportation in the amount of $42,199. Operations Director Nick White is recommended that we approve the purchase of the van from the Motor Company in Wisconsin.
Good find.
Yeah.
Any questions?
I just want to say thanks, Nick, for always finding the best deals and finding stuff that's impossible to find. So you've come through many times with that. Thank you.
I think next time I go new car shopping, I'm going to take Nick with me.
That could be his side hustle, is helping people
10%.
find good deals.
Right. So moved.
Support.
All right, I'm going to go backwards again. Mrs. Von Koenig,
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow,
Aye.
Mr. Bushu,
All right,
Mr. Scaletta,
Aye.
Mr. Ott,
Aye.
Mr. Allen,
Aye.
and I vote aye. All right, that takes us into public comment time, and we have one person for public comment, Renee Donarski. And I know you've done this before, so you're probably aware, but just to remind you that we do have a 5-minute time limit.
I will not be 5 minutes tonight. I'm here today to discuss school safety at the high school. As you know, there was a tragic shooting in Parkland, Florida on May 14th, 2018. Immediately after, former principal Brad Brunner closed the breezeway that connects the area by the art room to the CTE room. It was no longer used as a hallway because it is an open-air hallway with open access for people from the outside to merge seamlessly with our students. At the time, Brad Brunner insisted that it be closed for student safety. In the summer of 2018, just a few short months later after the shootings, a very tall metal fence was installed between the art room and the CTE wing that would no longer allow access to the breezeway for people from the outside, which leads to a building full of high school students. With the installation of the fence, the breezeway was reopened to staff and students as a hallway that following year, fall of 2018. But where it gets frustrating is the fence or gate has never worked properly and has remained wide open, with the outside world still being able to merge with students during the 5-minute passing period that happens every 5 minutes, that happens after every class and every day since then, and it's been 5 years. I personally travel through the breezeway, and so many off-campus kids come and go throughout that breezeway throughout the day, and those students are always parking on the east side of the auditorium parking lot and walking in and out at will, never walking through the front office, which I thought they were required to do. In the 2020-2021 school year, I spoke and emailed about this issue to various administrators expressing my concern. Then at the July 2022 board meeting 11 months ago, I was the only community member who spoke that day, and it was about this same issue. At the time, the board said that they needed to talk to Mr. Yockstetter about this because he was not at that particular board meeting. In October of 2022, I emailed about it again to high school administration 2 times. Then I emailed about it again just in March of this year to administration at the high school and received an email back saying that Nick White said that it should be fixed over spring break. I emailed about it again in April as it still wasn't fixed. I have pictures for you here that were taken in mid-May. The fence was still wide open, and it was open as recently as this afternoon. Since I arrive at school at 8:30 every morning, there has been at least 6 or 8 times where I have found the auditorium doors either propped open by trash cans or doors being held open by other students going to their cars between classes. I've also reported those instances every time I have seen it occur. Then on April 14th, staff received an email saying that there was an incident where 4 students from other schools were allowed into our school during the school day because the door was held open by some Lakeshore High School students. Needless to say, I'm very concerned about the safety breaches here at our school. I think before we launch into all of these new changes that are planned because of the past bond issue, we should first work on the school safety and this issue that started in 2019 that has been never finished. There is no need for a locking fence to protect the students if it is not closed and locked. And there is no point in any new furniture or boilers for our schools if we don't have students to fill the schools. Thank you.
Thank you.
Pass these.
That brings us to the next item on our agenda, which is to move into closed session for the purpose of student disciplinary action. So I would take a motion to move into closed session.
So moved.
Support.
And this is a roll call vote. So Mr. Allen?
Aye.
Mr. Ott?
Aye.
Mr. Scaletta?
Aye.
Mr. Bushu?
Aye.
Dr. Beckrow?
Aye.
Mrs. Von Koenig?
Aye.
And I vote aye.
There's the pictures.